Wonderful. Welcome back to our series where we are interviewing experts in a range of topics to give us a better understanding of what life is like within South Africa, and particularly today within the education context here in Johannesburg. We are delighted to have Mr Marx join us, and he is the head teacher at Pridwin School, which takes boys from age 6 through to 14. Is that right?
Yes, some of them will be 14. Some of them will turn 14 right at the end of the year, but most of them will be 13 in grade 7 or in the 7th grade.
Okay, wonderful. And just tell us what grades does that work out at in South African context? Is it grade 0?
In South African context, South African schools actually start in grade 1, although many schools will start in what we call grade R, or the reception year, on grade 0. And then we'll run through to grade 12. So there are 13 years in the South African school system, 12 of them compulsory. So the reception year, or the grade 0 year, which is grade 5-year-olds turning 6, is not compulsory. But just about every good school in the country actually runs a reception year as well.
Okay, wonderful. So to kick us off, can you just give us a bit of context and a bit of background into the education system and what's available, I suppose, particularly for expats that would be coming to the country?
Well, South Africa, as you know, has got we're infamous for apartheid. And apartheid is a system where, pretty similar to the United States, who had a segregation model where people were separated into schools. South Africa refined it to a ridiculous level, where every ethnic group had to have their own schools. And so in the past, there were 16, 17 departments of education for each ethnic group in the country. When democracy came to our country in 1994, all those education departments were closed down, and a national education department was actually set up. So there is now one curriculum for the whole country, and there's also one exit point for all the children in the country as well. South Africa has got the best of the world and the worst of the world in one place. By that, I mean that we've got the best schools in the world. Our children actually qualify for the best universities in the world. And some of our prep school and primary school children actually go on to some of the best colleges and high schools in the world. So I regularly feed some of my boys into Eton and Harrow. We haven't had any boys in Eton for a while now, but there are a number of boys in the Harrow school system. And yet we also have the worst of the world, in the sense that we've got some of our very poor communities are not functioning very well. And so South Africa is kind of notorious for some of the things that we don't do well as far as our poorer communities. And I think that that's also a legacy of apartheid. We're still struggling to actually to get over that, where the bulk of the population was neglected for many years in the apartheid system.
And so when you say you've got some of the best of the world, what does that mean, or what does that look like practically?
Well, if you had to imagine the very best schools in your own country, and in any other country for that matter, if you had to think about the wonderful estates that some of your schools are in your country and in the US, for example, you'll find those schools in South Africa as well. And so there are many absolutely superb world-class schools in South Africa, both in the state system and in the independent school system. Okay.
And how does it differ between the independent sector and the state sector? If an expat's moving here, should they go and look at some of the state schools? Are they excellent, or would you say just kind of go straight for independent?
Well, South Africa has quite a strong link as far as being a an ex-colony of the UK, of the British system. So, I mean, your famous Lord Kitchener actually set up some wonderful, wonderful schools that are in the state school system here in South Africa. They've got wonderful campuses, they've got wonderful facilities, and they are as good as, or if not better than, many of the independent schools that also exist in our country. We all have to follow, so a big difference between independent schools and state schools in South Africa is that we all have to comply with the minimum standards of the South African curriculum, but independent schools actually have the opportunity not to follow that particular curriculum slavishly. So we have to follow the minimum standards of that curriculum. But for example, in my own school, we've got elements of our curriculum borrowed from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from Australia, from Singapore. And so we give our students a very eclectic education where we are able to draw the best from the best in the world in order to enrich our curriculum.
And what would you say would be one of the main benefits for, let's say, an American family or even a Swedish family choosing a local school here in Durban?
Well, the amazing thing about our schools are that we're actually a very, very multicultural country. We've got 11 official languages, although all of our education is delivered mainly through English. And our schools are actually incredibly diverse and multicultural. So we're a little bit of a United Nations, for example, in my own school, where the bulk of our students are South African, but we've got students from all over the world. And it's just a wonderful mix of being able to actually see experience the diversity of South African culture, but also actually feel at home in an environment where people from all over the world are getting an education and then going back to their homes whenever the work finishes for their parents.
Wonderful. And you mentioned earlier about about grade naught. And the main concern of families moving will be when their children start, and then I guess at the end, if they're doing GCSEs, A-levels, the IB, or in South Africa, the matric. So in South Africa, children don't actually start until 6 turning 7. What impact would that have if a child is moving from the States or then going back to the States?
So I just need to correct you there. Our children start in the reception year, they're 5 turning 6 in that reception year.
Okay.
So that's the non-compulsory year for the whole country, although I would really say that there isn't a good school in South Africa that doesn't start their children at 5 turning 6.
Okay.
However, it's quite an informal year, so we don't believe that, as happens in your own system in the UK, that we should put too much pressure on our youngsters to actually do too much formal work at that age. And so we far prefer the Scandinavian model, where children are actually, we do formal work when they are 6 turning 7, and get them ready with conceptual work at that young age. And it's all about getting them ready for the more formal work. And yes, if you had a child coming from the UK who's already doing formal reading and writing, you'll find that your child from the UK is actually ahead of our children in terms of that part of that age group. However, within 2 years, we often find those parents mistakenly complaining that our system is not good enough or we're failing them because the child is now no longer at the top of the group, but has actually found his place in the rest of the class, and the rest of the South Africans actually have caught up.
And so if you don't have the same stress or focus on kind of reading and writing, what are all the other opportunities that the children then get exposed to?
So let me give you a little brief idea of what we would do in that reception year. The reception year is all about familiarizing themselves with the alphabet, with the number system, and thinking. So we want them to be able to be immersed in the world of preparatory world of language and of numeracy, and they will do the letter H. They will explore how that sound is actually used, or that consonant is used in language. It stands for a hedgehog, it stands for a hare. We will get them to think appropriately at their particular age on a higher level of thinking, and ask them to analyze the characteristics of a hare, analyze the characteristics of a hedgehog, and then part of that particular process would be for them to have a philosophical discussion as 5-year-olds, deciding whether they would prefer to be hedgehogs or hares, and why. And so there's a whole lot of analysis and synthesis of ideas and listening to each other and debating at an age-appropriate level. And then there are whole concrete counting strategies, development of number, and it is all about the preparatory work that underlies the foundations of good numeracy and literacy work.
Amazing. Sounds fantastic. And then at the other end of the spectrum is the matric. Do independent schools offer anything else, or is it just the matric that's on offer?
So there are two exit points, or there's one exit point in the country, and that is matric. However, there are two sort of approaches to that exit point. And so the independent schools write an independent examination board exit, and then the state schools will write a state matric exit point as well. And the two boards, the state education board and the independent board, will monitor and manage both of those qualifications. However, they're based on exactly the same sort of standard as far as the South African system is concerned. So we have to comply with similar standards. The interesting thing about our matric, we perform as a nation, very, very poorly in international benchmarks. And that is because we've got a very, very heavy tail of poorly performing schools in our country. And so there's a misperception that our exit point at matric level is actually not really very good. That's not true. Our standard of our matric is absolutely world class. Our children can very comfortably and very happily fit in to any university system anywhere else in the world. The problem that we have is that too many of our children are passed with too low a qualification by the state, and that's what gives us the bad rap. But the actual curriculum and the actual qualification that our children get, if they're getting a good mark, it's of an equivalent standard in the rest of the world.
Amazing. Okay, great to know. Great to know. And so, could you just talk us through what an average day or an average kind of week looks like within your school, let's say?
Well, I think that children that come to good schools in South Africa are incredibly privileged because despite the fact that it's raining cats and dogs at the moment, we've actually have probably the best weather in the world if you think about the different regions of our country and the wonderful weather that we actually experience. And so the whole schooling system is actually geared in such a way that it takes full advantage of the weather and of outdoor living. So our day would start with a typical timetable. 6 hours in the day would be given to the curriculum. There would be mathematics, the languages. We offer 3 languages at our school, and most schools offer 2 languages. We will do robotics, and many schools will also do coding. We will do music is integrated into the curriculum, and sport and drama, public speaking. All of those activities are actually woven into a typical week at our school. So each week works. So at my particular school, we've got the year is broken up into 6 units, and those 6 units, 2 units per term, and each of those units will have its own sort of characteristic sports, swimming and athletics, or cricket, or football, or rugby, hockey, track and field, etc. But woven into that too will be public speaking, would be drama, would be music. Every every one of my boys, for example, learns to read music and learns to play 2 musical instruments in their time with us. There's choir work. There's a very, very rich experience for most of our children in the more well-equipped state and independent schools.
And why have you, as a school, decided that every child will read music and learn music? That's a great opportunity.
Well, I suppose each school has got its own unique purpose for living. I think we're all in the business of educating young people, but I think that each school must find its own unique identity. And so for our school, it's all about unlocking their potential so that they can be meaningful citizens in the world one day and make a difference and make the world a better place. So that's the unique thing that is special for us. And we've always asked ourselves the question, well, what does that mean? And how would we do that in a typical day or a typical week for our boys in our school? And the only way that you unlock potential in mathematics is to put the boy in a mathematics class. If you want to unlock their music potential, I think you have to make them play music for a period of their lives at least. We don't want to lock them into something that they hate forever, but it is important, I think, for our children to have the opportunity to experience things.
Yeah, amazing. And what would your advice be for families coming to look at school? What are the things that they should be looking for and be aware of? How do they choose?
If I was a parent and I was wanting to look for a school that would be suitable for my children, I think one of the things that I would really put on the top of my list was what would how values driven is that school? Because I think that schools are far more than their curricula. I think schools are far more than just making sure that they're the best at mathematics and science and robotics or languages. I think that there is an element of schooling that is so important for the world of work in the future, and that is we need to teach our children how to think and apply problem solving to life's problems, but then we also need to know how to get on with one another. And I think that South Africa is quite an amazing place because you'll hear a lot of noise about us in terms of the bad things that we've been responsible for in the past, as far as perhaps apartheid is concerned, and our politics is very noisy. But you know what is really fascinating? That this is one of the most amazing places that I've encountered in the world, where we're getting it right in so many ways to actually lead in instances of getting on with people. I know that we're famous for Nelson Mandela and Tutu's statements of being a rainbow nation. And perhaps the gloss has worn off a little bit in terms of that particular term. But if you visited our schools, you would see a part of the nation that is really working so well at developing social skills and the ability to actually work in a cross-cultural way to actually be very, very different and relevant to the world of the future. And I think that that's something that parents coming into our part of the world should be aware of and ask those kinds of questions is how are you valuing diversity? How are you valuing the kind of education that will actually put my child into a position where they can participate meaningfully in the world of work that is changing so rapidly?
Amazing. Amazing. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that we haven't covered? Any other bits of advice or things to look out for or know about?
Yes, I think I would like to just say to people that I've had the privilege of traveling widely around the world. And I would say that I think that South Africa gets a bit of a bad rap as far as the way that the world speaks about us, because in today's sort of communications that are so easily, as soon as somebody sneezes on the other side of the world, we get to hear about it without access to technology. Yes, crime is a problem in certain areas of South Africa, but my goodness me, I think all of my staff who actually, and about half of my staff have spent teaching assignments overseas, have all come back because they believe that there's no better place to raise their kids than here in South Africa. And South Africa is as safe as you want to make it. I think if you live with your peers, you probably won't go to many parts of the world. But if you have got a sense of adventure and want to learn about some really incredible things that are going on in the world, in South Africa is certainly a place that you should consider.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your time and explaining everything so precisely for us. If people want to get in touch with you or to know more about Pridwin or other independent schools, where can they go to find that information?
Well, certainly our contact details are on the website, but you're welcome to actually, I'm very happy to leave you our email address, admin@pridwin.co.za. We will certainly get back to anybody who would like to actually find out a little bit more about us or about anybody else in the country. It would be very, very easy for me to actually connect people to any of the other schools, because we've got a very, very strong Independent Schools Association and we all know each other in the country.
Perfect, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that the grass stays nice and green with all the rain. And it's been a pleasure to interview you and to get to know about the amazing things that are happening over. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.